Hello, my dear audience, lovely friends, the ladies and gentlemen, my dear fellow Californians, most importantly, welcome to the show. Jack Chow with the G&E TV talking about water again. For the past 2.5 years, we have been paying lots of attention to water, namely our water, California water, because there are lots of things. If you have a zillion of things to be worrying about, you will better worry this one because it's your lifeline, it's your own backyard, it's own California, talking about our own water. That's why we decided every now and then we would throw a show here talking about water, call it Water Update. Today, joining me in today's Water Update are my wonderful friends. The two of them I rely upon a lot. I believe California rely upon them a lot. We have Tony Zampiello. He is the executive officer of Water Master of California. And we have on his right-hand side, Mr. Ken Manning. He is the executive director of Water Quality Authority of California. To both of you, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Jack.
I would say welcome back to the show.
Yeah.
There are many, many times, right? So, last time we were on the show, you guys were on the show, we were at the, just a little celebrative moment when we had a little water for the spring. Right after that, everything stopped. And for about a month and a half, no, 2 months, we haven't seen anything. So I would like to, in a very urgent needs, to find out how California is doing in water.
Well, you know,
let's
talk about California first.
Yeah.
California in general. Then let's focus in here on the San Gabriel Valley, and Tony can give you a complete update on what's going on there. In the state of California, we had an exceptionally good year. We had about 124% in Northern California of normal. We had a chance to fill all of our reservoirs in Northern California. We have a tremendously robust snowpack up in the high Sierras, and that's great because as that melts, that continues to feed water down into the delta in Northern California, and so that really helps us. The weak point in that whole system is that we've got to move that water from the delta then down to Southern California using the State Water Project. And that State Water Project is under a lot of pressure from environmental concerns about a number of resources there. Most people identify with is the little fish, the Delta smelt.
The smelt thing, yeah.
So getting the water through there, but even given that restraint, we still have a lot of water coming into Southern California, and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California is looking for places to put some of that water, and Tony is working with them right now on a storage program here in the San Gabriel Basin, and he can talk a little bit about that. But overall, the state of California had a good year. Is it enough to bring us out of a drought here in Southern California? No, it's not. We need another couple of years. Now, Northern California did very, very well, and it brought them up to where they needed to be. Southern California wasn't so generous. We had about 124% or 118% of normal here in Southern California. It was a good year. But the problem is that it didn't show up in the way of runoff, and maybe I'll let Tony talk a little bit about what happened in terms of the runoff and why we didn't develop as much water even though the rain came down.
Yes, please, Tony.
Sure. You know, what we've talked about before on the show is the imported water versus the local water that we have, and so what we've seen since the rainy season, which is about May 1st. April to May is usually when it tapers off here. We've seen a huge increase in the rain over the year before, over the average of the last 5 years. But as far as the San Gabriel Valley, we depend 80% on the local water. And as Ken said, we did capture about 60,000 acre feet, but we were behind by almost 500,000 acre feet. So we're spreading water right now out of the San Gabriel Canyon and distributing that water equally between all of the cities from Seal Beach all the way up to the mountains.
I see.
And we've seen an increase for a while. We had a pretty good uptick in the Key Well that we've talked about before, kind of the dipstick for the basin. But now we've tapered off at about 180 feet above sea level, and now with the demands, what we're seeing is that folks typically, as of July 1st, we were just around 10% more groundwater use than we had seen from the year before.
I see.
So part of the struggle that we have is that when you look at the city of Los Angeles and they take water from the Owens Valley and they take water from Metropolitan, the folks that are more reliant on what we call imported water this year are doing better in Southern California than the folks that have the local supply. So we have capability in the basin to bring some imported water in with Metropolitan. We're trying to work out the details on that. There's some concerns. There's a little mussel that can show up. I think we may have talked about the quagga mussel before. It's what they call an invasive species. We're trying to work out the details to ensure that isn't transported into the basin, and then we're going to try and spread some of that imported water going from now until Christmas.
Thank you for the analysis. Thank you both for that. Let me try to understand it with common sense, because we're not in the business. What we want to do is have simplified a pattern that we probably want to make everybody understanding this, right? So is it saying that by mathematics or mathematically, if you count the land square mileage and the water we have, by doing that calculation, theoretically, we are better off than the years before? And then actually you're talking about Southern California, talking especially our San Gabriel Valley, due to the aqueduct system that you mentioned, which cannot effectively transfer, and due to the environmentalists or environmental control, you have those whatever obstacles. You could not utilize the waters you have to make it effective here. Am I right?
I think that was a pretty good summary of where we stand.
I see. So,
but the bottom line is are we better today than we would have been had there been less rain? And the answer is yes. We are better off. As Tony mentioned, the Key well is just hovering right around 180 feet right now, which is good compared to where it was, about 8 or 9 feet lower than that. But it's starting to go down because now we're in the summer season and people are starting to pull water. As they use water, the producers that they buy water from are pulling it from the groundwater. And so that is starting to decrease the
but you just mentioned we have 124% this year, and he just mentioned we have only 110. Where did the other 14% go?
Well, he was talking in percentage. I was talking about
feet.
Acre feet.
Yeah, acre feet. All right, so I'm confused. I thought that was by percentage also.
And even though we got a higher than normal percentage of rainfall in the basin, it didn't develop 124% more water that came down through the canyons, through the watershed, and into the groundwater. Because we had 5 years of drought that just really perched those mountains, when that rain came, it just sucked it up like a sponge. And so we didn't get the rainfall coming and hitting the mountains and then coming down into the river system and then down into the valley. What we ended up with is the hillsides and the plants were just sucking that water up. And so we developed, it was about 65–70% of the normal rain of runoff. So even though we got a higher percentage of rain, we got a lower percentage of runoff.
I see. They kind of offset each other.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. They kind of offset each other, right?
Yes. So I think that the ideal situation would be if we could get the same rain next year, which nobody can predict. Then I think our capture rate would go way up because everything we're seeing along the river as we're spreading this water from the winter, that as things get saturated, you start to see better results in
other words, what we're seeing now is a little comparatively optimistic. Is that a situation or something sustainable, or reproducible, or just a Mother Nature?
No, I think that I mean, last year was really wet in Northern California, and even though Ken said we got 120% of our average or normal, you have to remember that there's 5 years of almost zero thrown in there. So for Southern California, I would, in my experience, I've seen years like that in Southern California back to back. Do we think we're going to get the same in Northern California? I think in their situation might be opposite, where if they get another year as wet as they did, there probably is going to be more percentage of loss, because there's snow that's still up there. I have a couple of friends that have gone up fishing that have said that some of the upper lakes, there's still ice on some of the upper lakes.
Well, they're still they're planning on skiing at Mammoth Lakes all the way past July 4th. So there's a lot of snow up there right now. I think it was almost 200% of normal.
So we're not asking it not to rain, and we're not going to act like spoiled kids and say, okay, well, now we have enough. But the fact that there's snowpack there that will probably lead into the next winter, my guess would be next spring, if they had the same kind of record or close to the same record snow, there'd probably be much more runoff that they would lose.
In other words, the ice that's not melted this summer could be accumulated. When next year, with the next winter, and then there comes the next spring. Then if we're lucky to get the same amount or similar amount of rain that we have in spring, though, will little accumulate up, right?
And for us here, it's all really about, you see how the mountains are and how long the snow lasts in Southern California. So it's about that snow, but it's also just about steady rainstorms through the rain season.
All right, okay. In other words, bank reserve. Another way of bank reserve. My dear audience, today, once again, we are talking about our California water update. Water, that's our lifeline. That's so important. Last night I was watching a movie. It was totally talking about water to human. Water to human. We're so connected. We can not do for a single minute without water, or a single second without water. So that's how important. With me today are two wonderful water officials. We have Tony Zampiello, the Executive Officer of Water Master of California, and we have Mr. Ken Manning. He is Executive Director of Water Quality Authority. They are sharing lights on this issue, and thank you for their unrelenting efforts to educate people, because we do need that. Thank you. Let's take a very short moment out. When we come back, we'll find out, with the given situation, with the given kind of like lucky situation, what we want to do and what we are seeing into the summer or into the fall. Stay with us, please. Hello, my dear friends, lovely ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show. Jack Chow on East West with G&E TV. This time with this show, we're talking about water again, water update. For 2.5 years, we've been constantly throwing efforts in here in bringing the updated information of California, because we believe we just have been through, we're not out yet maybe, deadliest drought of the past, last time we say 150 years or something. Anyway, we're talking about it. We'll still stretch that idea to let you know where we are. With me, my good friend, Ken Manning. He is the Executive Director of Water Quality Authority of California. And we have Mr. Tony Zampiello. He is the Water Master of California. All right, so welcome back to the show. Now, given the relatively optimistic situation so far versus the drought, like Ken just mentioned, that the land is so dry that it sucks water like a sponge. So is the water, is the land, is the earth, our earth, get the water full amount? What extent? By what extent?
Well, I think that this winter has helped the watershed a lot to get back to where it would be in a normal cycle. And we've even seen it with some of this, as I say, some of the we've talked in the past how we store that rainwater, and now we're where if you drive over the San Gabriel River, you'll see water flowing, and that water, just from the unlined sand bottom river, we get water back into the basin that way. And so what we see is over time, it's starting to act more characteristically like it did in historically. We didn't have water to spread for 5 years. When we first started spreading it, the river acted like it was, strangely enough, like it was in some parts, like it was a line channel. It wasn't accepting the water.
Exactly.
And then in some areas where you would see them, where we open a dam and maybe a day later you would see water, you wouldn't see water for 7 days. So now it's finally kind of getting conditioned back to where we can predict.
That was exactly something I was going to ask you. I've been here in this country for 34 years already. Back then, during my early days, in San Gabriel City, by Mission and San Gabriel, somewhere there, there's a little bridge. Underneath, there's water. There's a little river. And I used to go there and do some reading, because you hear the water, something like that. And another location I like was at on Garvey towards Rosemead by a street Lee, L-E-E, right? Yeah. There's a river. Yeah. Now you see nothing but an open trench. No, nothing, no water at all. Yeah. Not even grass. Yeah. Right. So, are they the ones supposed to be filled when we say we are back to normal?
The answer is no. Those are called tributaries to the main San Gabriel. What we're trying to do right now is because there is a backlog of water owed below the Whittier Narrows, we're actually trying to move some of the water as fast as we can down into those lower areas. So where you'll see those tributaries run is as the aquifer gets conditioned back. There are areas in the eastern part of the San Gabriel Valley that if we have 3 or 4 wet years, because the soil will retain it high up, you'll see that it looks like water leaks, but it's really their natural springs. So that's the optimum condition for us to catch it. If it just all gets saturated or captured in the upper area or the sandy area, it never really goes down to the lower area to be stored.
So it has to be that means someday, somehow it will come back. The landscape I described?
I have no idea. I mean, I have no idea whether it'll be exactly back. I think it will come back. I think that, you remember in the past sessions we've talked about cycles. And California goes through these cycles periodically. And we're now in a cycle where we're getting about 7 dry years out of 10. We're getting 3 wet years. And that's tending to be a pattern that we're noticing, where it used to be pretty close to 50-50, 5 and 5. Now we're about 7 years out of 10 we're getting dry years. And we're gonna have to start living with that. That's why when we talk about your viewers continuing to use conservation at their homes and businesses.
You're right.
We really need to do that, is because we know that that's going to be a continuing trend. 7 out of 10 years we're going to be dry.
Simply, what I understand is that if we have a 5-5 situation, 5 years of dryness, 5 years of wetness, we're okay, right? What we lost during the 5 years, we shall have in kind of back in the other 5 years. But now we have 7-3. Well, eventually we're going to run out.
Or some have predicted that if you use your stream as an analogy, the years where you saw water running, you might see 1 year twice the water running, and then the next year it dry. So
by logic it works that way.
So when you do the math and you say, okay, that's where we're kind of still looking at the numbers, because when you do the math and you compare it to historical, you can't just use the raw numbers and say, oh, this is where we're at or that's where we're at. So you might say, where 35 years ago that stream at every April there was some measured flow. Now it might be that you go in February and it's 3 times the flow, but by the spring or April there is no flow.
I see.
So
okay, all right. Right now we're talking about we're in the middle of summer days, and there comes the fall. California fall is always hot, right? Always dry too.
Yes.
And then there are brush fires almost everywhere every single day. Yeah. Now all calls for land but dry land, right? So into the summer and into the fall, what kind of weather pattern or water pattern are we looking at, please?
Well, I mean, the early predictions. We've talked about before how being a weatherman is the only job you can be wrong every day of your life and still keep your job. But what they're talking about is a similar pattern to last year. But you know what impacts us is where the Gulf Stream or the highs are. And what really impacted us for all those years is we had this high that was parked over Southern California. But the early predictions that I've talked about for us is a very similar year to next year. But there were points in the 5-year drought where they said, if you remember, there was one scientist that was saying we've got this Godzilla formation and we've got this El Nino formation, and we're going to have more water than we know what to do with, and have these, what did they call them, atmospheric rivers. It didn't happen. So you know, if this 5 years were an anomaly, then we would expect, and if you were going to go back and on past history, you probably would be looking at another year of above average and then start going into a dry cycle.
All right. That's
the listeners have to know.
Yeah, that's the best already, right? The best already. How about this winter? We had this El Nino winter or something. We called for it, and how did it work last time when it get here? And are we expecting another one? I'm thinking about if we're lucky enough, we get a wet spring and then we get another wet winter. Oh my God, let's try to get over with it or something like that. So how do you look into the winter, please?
As Tony said, the predictions are that going into the winter, that they're saying that this winter will be above average. We don't know what that exactly means, but we do know they're being optimistic because things start to be lining up. What would be perfect, if you're looking at what's the perfect situation for people living in Southern California, it would be rains that come about every 2 to 3 weeks at about a rate of about a ½ an inch.
That never happened.
Every once in a while that happens, but you know, that's our search situation, because that ½ inch of rain falls, we're able to capture it, get it in the ground, then the next ½ inch comes and we get it in the ground. We keep banking all that water. If it came in that pattern, we would take 100% of the water that falls in the watershed and get it into the ground. Working with LA County Flood Control and working with Watermaster and working with all the agencies that are involved with that process, they're very efficient at getting that water into the ground. And we would do very well if that was a pattern. But unfortunately, we know that doesn't always happen. We'll get a rain that comes in at 3/4 of an inch or an inch. Next one, it might be 1/4 of an inch or less. You never can tell what the pattern's going to be. But if it comes like it did this year, I don't know what the percentage that we got into the ground this year of all the water that we did get, but it was a high percentage.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is we had virtually, from where they measure on the river, we didn't lose any water to the ocean because in Central Basin, the other basin that's below us, they have these dams they've put up in the river, and they were actually able to capture more water from the valley floor and spread it than we were. But again, that's really not the San Gabriel Valley. So,
but make a lot of sense. Remember last time we're talking about when Mother Nature has water, it has only this much water, right? One way or the other is the same amount of water that Mother Nature has. It may give you this way or the other way around, or so on and so forth. It depends on you how you want to capture it, how you want to use it. That makes more sense that way.
The other thing I think it's important to understand, and we've mentioned this in previous segments, is that we're not just counting on rainfall anymore. The people who work in the area of supply of water are looking at a number of other strategies to make sure that we are able to capture as much water as possible. So you're looking at recycling of water that was going to the sanitation district and reusing that water and cleaning it to high levels. We're also talking about better stormwater capture. We're talking about more conservation. In some places, you're seeing desalinization taking hold. So there's a lot of different things that are going on to try and maximize the amount of water that we're able to use here in Southern California. It's no longer just one strategy, and that's the way it was for decades, is that we only use one strategy, and that's capturing rainwater. Now we have to use all of our water. We can't use it just once.
Thanks to the system we have, which works in a multi-layer ways, right? Even you mentioned the desalinization, and that's quite a bit. And I read a book about desalinization the other day. It looks like it has a brighter future, right? Today with me are my good friends, Tony Zampiello and Ken Manning. They both are water officials of California. Let's take a very short moment now. When we come back, we'll continue finding about the other ways from the upper end and from down to the lower end. Shift the middle part out. We'll see how we are doing over these two areas. Stay with us, please. Hello, my dear friends. Welcome back to the show. Jack Chow on this water update with my good friends, Tony Zampiello and Ken Manning. They both are water officials of California, talking about how California is doing. We understand we had a very lucky spring. We had a very lucky winter. Into the summer, even though we stopped seeing lots of rains, but our water, thanks for the systems, thanks for the efforts, and by the way, it's a multi-level efforts. We are better off than the year before, right? Now, I understand that in addition to the water coming from North California, we have a lots of import from Colorado River, other states, right? How are we doing in that channel, please?
Well, this year, because there was so much water generated within the state, the importer that we deal with, Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, they chose to reduce their take on the Colorado because it was suffering a drought too. And on that system, there are certain, they measure the level of certain lakes, and then it triggers shortages, and so they can store their allocation. They had water coming in that they could use for the system. So they went 100% state water project for some months, and then for water quality purposes, they brought back in a small blend of Colorado River. So things were looking up on the Colorado this year. It was a little bit better, but again, they're even in, I think they were like in 13 or 14 years of dry conditions. So Metropolitan chose to leave most of their take there so that it didn't trigger these other actions that had to be taken by the western states that are part of it.
Just about a week ago, I flew in to Las Vegas, and we flew in over Lake Mead, and you could tell that the water levels are still considerably lower than what they need to be. So Lake Mead and the whole Colorado River system needs to increase significantly in order to supply water. The Colorado River, going back to the 1930s, developed a formula that separated these waters out amongst the 7 western states that use that water. And the northern portion of those states gets 7.5 million acre feet. The lower portion gets 7.5 million acre feet. What we found that after the 1930s is that 15 million acre feet that people are pulling off of that river is too much. That in fact, the years that they used to gauge how much water could be taken off were excessively large quantities of water were falling. So that was not a good period of time to be choosing. That really the amount that should be coming off the Colorado River is more closer to around 12 million. So if we continue to take 15 million acre feet off the Colorado River, we're going to continue to draw that down. And so you add the drought to that. So the Colorado River is in as much strain and as much trauma as the state of California. So they're going to have to work out an issue, because back in the 1930s, I mean, Nevada gets about 400,000 acre feet off the Colorado River annually. Well, that decision was made back when Las Vegas was just a little town of about 40 or 50 people. So there was nobody living in Las Vegas in the 1930s.
Right.
But look at it today.
Yeah.
You know, Henderson, Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, those areas are booming. And they still only get 400,000 acre feet. So they're going to have to do some work on the Colorado River. And Metropolitan Water District, on behalf of the Southern California constituents, have been doing an excellent job working with agriculture to try and shift water from some of those agricultural regions into the metropolitan region, and so that we can get more water off the Colorado and develop water for us. Unfortunately, there's a situation going on in the Colorado River, and Tony mentioned it earlier, called the quagga mussel. And the quagga mussel has moved from Europe to the United States, starting in the east, and it's moving west. And now we're starting to develop it in the western part of the United States. And in systems like the Colorado River, these little mussels will start growing on inlet and outlet structures, and they clog those systems. And so, and there's nothing that kills them that we've been able to find that's environmentally acceptable.
I see.
So the whole process of trying to find a resolution to the quagga mussel is keeping us from being able to move water as freely as we would like. But then, so you add the strain on the Colorado River with the quagga mussel. That's why Metropolitan moved their strategy to Northern California water, because of the abundance there. But they've still got to solve that problem on the Colorado River and work out a way to make sure the balance of use on that river works out over many decades.
Putting together does that mean the traditional concept of relying upon Colorado River supply kind of obsolete?
It's very flawed, I would say, if you were going to put all your eggs in
right? Oh yeah, put all your eggs in one basket, right? So
because as Ken said, to talk a little bit about the strategy, when you talk about offsetting agricultural, it means that maybe those farmers are a little more flexible than the urban folks, where they can in certain years not water their crops, if they can't do it indefinitely.
If they grow strawberries, they could grow tomatoes, they of course need a lot of water.
So
like
then maybe they're paid a certain amount not to grow that crop. And so they save the cost of growing it, but they maybe make the same by following it. But it can't be indefinite. So it adds flexibility to the system. But as Ken said, it's kind of like what's really has been found is the original calculations were too optimistic.
Yeah, you're right. And as a matter of fact, the reason I'm asking is that to confirm if it is a rocky foundation. Right now, with a rocky foundation like that, with the Mother Nature part we discussed already with Northern California, which is better off than previous years, and we're talking about the next downstream. When I'm talking about downstream, is recycled water and the desalinization, other ways of getting water.
Right.
So, how are we doing compared to the years before in those areas? Please.
Well, you know, I think we've talked technology-wise, there have been huge advancements with desalinization to where it's much more economical. The problem for us would be, if we were to promote that or look at that, is our distance from the source, and there isn't, for all kinds of different reasons, you can't commingle the two systems. So you would have to have a different plumbing system to move it here. And the other issue that I think that isn't talked about enough is the fact that we talk about energy use and all of that in California, and it still is a fairly energy intensive process. Recycled water, we have to treat it to a certain degree anyway, just to discharge it to the ocean. So you can do another treatment on it and use that water to put back in the ground. And we've shown now some of the regulators that there are projects where you can do that and it doesn't cause harmful effects. And I think the huge thing the drought has helped us with is there used to be a stigma to recycled water because of where it came from, when in reality all water is recycled, right? We've talked about. And so I think that's the biggest benefit to recycled water that has happened from this drought.
Do we have numbers to indicate out of every gallon of water used or used water, how much is recaptured?
Sure.
You do, right?
Yeah, with desal, it's not as efficient. With desal, you know, typically you have about a 22 to 25% loss in the processes that exist. Again, it's getting more and more efficient. But what you're doing is you're condensing the salt water you bring in down to a very concentrated brine. And you know, some of the newer plants, they actually take that water, put it back into the stream again, and reuse it. But at the end of the day, the math is the math. With recycled water, the biggest impact to it is the fact that you have a situation where it's impacted by another management scheme called conservation. So the less water people use, the less recycle you have. But
of course,
the percentage of recovery of recycled water, because typically the recycled water from our area doesn't generate the same level of brine or waste, is very, very efficient from what you capture. You know, I would say the loss is maybe 5%, and that's probably just evaporation and some other things.
And all of that said, you got to understand there's a lot of research going on right now to try and create greater efficiency in these recovery processes that Tony just described. So today, our technology is better than it was 20 years ago. And we expect that in 20 years it'll even be better and maybe allow us to get the cost of desalinization and even recycled water and water treatment of polluted groundwater basins. All of that will become much more efficient. Today, California, about 19% of all the energy used in California goes towards some process of moving, treating, or dealing with water. 19% and the largest single user of electricity in California is the Edmonston pumping plant that moves water from the San Joaquin Valley up over the Tehachapis and into Southern California. That's the largest user of electricity in California by far.
But he mentioned a very significant number, that's about 95% of the wastewater supposed to be recovered can be recovered.
It can be. And again, with that recycled water, it's the logistics. One of the things that Metropolitan Water District just approved is a pilot, I think it's a 1 million gallon a day plant to put down at the Carson. There's another plant in Carson to see what constituents need to be treated and how best they can have uniform water quality coming out of that plant. And then the next phase would be, where can you put it? Where do you move it? What basins can you put it in? So
see, we got gravity you have to deal with here. And all of this water moves downhill. And so Carson happens to be at the lowest end of the system. The problem is that the San Gabriel Valley is higher up into the system. That means that water all has to be pumped all the way back up here in order for us to use it. So are we the best users of that water, or maybe that water should offset water that we could get more readily, like the watershed, water comes out of the watershed, and let those lower in the system use that water. Those are the kind of things that are being worked out now.
There are lots of details, right?
Yes, a lot
of details, not as simple as the water, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, of all the measures, the technology taken into consideration, though, to be cost effective, how are we do the math of recycled water, desalinized water, imported water, and the water from Northern California by Mother Nature?
Well, I think one of the challenges to water and the water business, and having to have sold projects to boards that I've worked for, is that you build a house of cards if you just say one direction is the right direction to go. So, you know, in the past few years, what we've looked at is, you may have stormwater, which is relatively cheap, but you can't rely on it, and then you've got recycled. So you take the two together and you average it out. So an example is, for one of the projects that we're considering in the San Gabriel Valley, the cost was somewhere around $1,800 per acre foot of water to treat and deliver. And then if you looked at that solely on its own, you would go, well, the stormwater is somewhere in the probably the single digits.
I see.
$15, $20, $30 an acre foot to put together. So the way you really have to have people think about it is, this is the reliability, and this is cheap water, but it's less reliable. Yeah. So when you add the two together, you come out with maybe an average of $700-800 an acre foot, but it's highly reliable water, and that's the decision.
That makes lots of sense. Yeah. That makes lots of sense.
And we've for the most part have tapped into that low hanging fruit. You know, if you think about conservation is a fairly cheap way to generate water, because you just don't use it. You were able to keep it, and then water that falls, the rainfall, that's very cheap because it falls locally and we can capture it locally, and then imported is on top of that, and then you've got recycled on top of that, and you've got desal, and all the price goes up as you go up. But you can't ignore even these expensive sources of water because you're not as reliable with those that are down below.
So when you get the higher cost, though, you go from this necessity of going absolutely necessary, something like that kind of, right? All right, my dear friends, today with my my good friends Tony and Ken, we're learning a lot about our water update, and we have a next issue to talk about, maybe not directly water related, but environmental related. And let's take a very short moment now. When we come back, we'll continue from there, please. Hello, my lovely audience, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Californians. Welcome back to the talk about California water. Well, we drink water, we live on water, and there is another liquid we live on too, which is gasoline. Gasoline is a big thing, especially to Californians. We are on wheels. If moving is in the blood of Americans, we Californians are on wheels. So, and recently we heard about the gasoline gasoline tax increase by a jump, 60-something-3%. And I myself been looking everywhere to find out the answer. Is it a partisanship, right? When I ask Democrats, they say it is the Republicans, and vice versa. Until then, I was directed to environmentalists. It is their call. I believe you two belong to the environmentalist category. Did you ever call for a gasoline tax increase, please?
Well, I wouldn't classify Tony and I specifically as your typical environmentalist.
I think the environmentalists wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't. I don't think they would either. You know, we're looking for the pragmatic approach to environmental issues. In many cases, some of the environmental community will go to extremes. Neither one of us are extremists. We're looking at practical ways of solving environmental issues here in California. And so, if the question is, did we call for a gas tax? The answer is no. We did not. And the water community did not want a gas tax either. So the gas tax itself came about because if you kind of take the holistic California, we know that fossil fuels have a longevity to them. That eventually fossil fuels have to be taken out of the system and switched over to others. But as that technology is being developed, we need to continue to use our cars and our gasoline tax, or our gasoline, and that needs to be taxed to fix the roads, etc. So the state of California enacted the gas tax because a lot of the other gasoline taxes that were gathered in the past have been diverted to other things, and in some cases to other issues unrelated to highways or cars. If
not squandered.
That's that's there to, everybody have to make that decision. But the bottom line is they're not going towards the roads that we drive on. So they created this new tax that specifically has to go to the road system and transportation. And I'm glad that they're doing that. The other thing, strategies you're seeing a lot more are fees that you pay to drive in certain lanes on freeways, and these fees then help offset costs. So you see California struggling with this whole idea. How do you maintain the roads? Because increase in number of people on the roads is going up. I mean, you drive to work every day. You know, you see more cars every day on the freeway. So we have to figure out a way to maintain those, and they felt that the tax. In talking with those in Sacramento, I don't think the Republicans supported that gas tax. So if you're looking at who voted for the gas tax, it was primarily the Democratic members of the Assembly and Senate, and the governor was pushing for that. I don't think the Republicans, I don't know that there was even one that voted
but it's
for
all, it is now all cross-lined. Republican, some Republicans voted in support of it, and even some Democratic voted against it. And that's why they're pointing at environmentalists to say it's their call. So
well, I think, you know, Ken and I spend a lot of time. Ken spends a lot more time than me in Sacramento, but I go up there. And part of the challenge that a lot of people in California don't really want to face, and the way that we look at the gas tax, is that adds cost to the treatment that we do, because things have to be transported. It takes money away from folks that might be more willing to spend it on water resources. So what we really push for is have a plan, make some sense, and spend the money correctly. We've been, both of us have been real active in how the bond money for the water has been spent, because at one point it was all about the water bond, the very first bond, and then it became, well, if water runs through it, or it's watered, or there are bathrooms that need water, well, we should get the money to do that. And so that's really, for us, that's what everybody needs to look at, is overall, it's just not on gas.
yeah. The earmark money is not used for the purpose the money was collected, and we've seen that for at least twice, and we can all testify that.
Yeah.
And question is that who is going to guarantee that this time they're going to use the money for road, for infrastructure?
Well, the law, as I've read it, pretty much guarantees that the money that's collected on this tax has to go into the roads, repairing the road systems and transportation improvements. Some of the
What
water,
if they don't? Anybody to be held responsible? Anybody goes to jail for that?
well, I would
No.
hope that the people in Sacramento police themselves. Now, that may be overly optimistic, but the fact of the matter is that by the fact that the bond, or the tax in the way it was implemented, says that the money has to go there. The state auditor and our controller are the ones who actually will monitor that, and our treasurer.
All right, okay. And also, it is not that bad a concept to blame or to point to environmentalists, because it is them that call for the hybrid cars, right? So with the gas increase that much, there could be more people turning for their cars, and also lots of people would probably go for the high-speed rails. So, any comment on that?
Let's kind of tie this back to water, and I'll try and do that. As these costs go up, and they're going to go up naturally, whether they're the gasoline tax, costs are going up. You're seeing a number of trends in in decisions people are making. You're seeing more and more people moving into the inner city so that they live closer to their jobs. They're living in more high dense. If you look at the decisions by the city councils, even out here in the San Gabriel Valley, they're making decisions about higher density home improvements, so that you're getting more living space per acre than you have ever seen before. And the reason for that is because trying to create affordable housing so that young couples can move into housing units here in the San Gabriel Valley.
Okay.
Tying that to water, we look at the per capita use of water here in Southern California. As density goes up, the per capita use of water goes down, because you don't have the large yards, you don't have the backyards, you don't have large properties. So the per capita use of water goes down considerably. And that's something that we are in favor of. We would like to be able to keep that trend moving. And so having higher density, we're not necessarily against, but every community has to make those decisions on their own about how they're going to implement those strategies. And it's kind of a foreign concept to those urban communities like West Covina or Azusa or Glendora, because they have been generally larger lots, properties that people can have front yards and backyards. They're not used to these 3, 4, 5, 6-story buildings of housing units, of apartments and condominiums. But that's where it's going. And if you go downtown Los Angeles along the 110 freeway, every building that's being built down there, seems like 9 out of 10 buildings are condominium housing. So that high density is driving down the per capita use, which is great.
My only concern, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, but the transportation planning has to catch up with it.
Yes.
Because you know what you're going to start seeing is more clogging of surface streets. We already know the 210 freeway is like a parking lot most of the time.
It's almost everything, yeah.
So all of that has to go in hand, and then the positive side, if this money is distributed back to the cities, is it will generate jobs, and it you know, it's proven that water projects and transportation projects and street projects do generate jobs, and that helps a certain sector of the.
But problem is that when they failed us for so many times, so we no longer trust them.
That's true.
The trick is sending $1 to Sacramento and getting at least 90 cents back. Right? Instead of sending $1 to Sacramento and only getting.
And no, we get nothing back in the previous cases, right?
So.
We were one of the bond measures. We wrote road measure, water measure, bond measure for several times, right? And we never seen the bridge is still same bridge, and the road condition is still bumpy.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Very good. Anyway, I just borrow your time for this side issue. It's water related anyway, environmental related anyway. My dear friends, I have a principle. Every time when I have a crying baby, I bring the crying baby to the mother or the father. Okay, good. Now my baby is no longer crying, and my dear friends, with the help of my friend Ken Manning, Water Quality Authority Executive Director, and with Tony Zampiello, Water Master, our problem get resolved for the time being. Probably somewhere end of the fall, before winter, we want to see you again.
Yeah, we might have a better picture of what things are
looking
like.
We might, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So, my dear audiences, thank you very much for watching, and to my friends, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.